All right, welcome everybody to the, what is this, September edition of the Kentuckiana FileMaker Developers Group. If you are watching us on YouTube, we do meet live and in person the fourth Tuesday of every month, and everybody and anybody is welcome. If you have any interest at all in FileMaker, it doesn't matter if you are a absolute beginner just starting out, or if you've been doing it for years or decades even, you're welcome to attend. So check us out at kyfmp.com for our next event and register online there. And we would love to have you join us. A couple months ago, Dennis Burnham was so gracious to help us out when we had a last minute cancellation for a presenter. He wanted to present the presentation he's going to present today, but wasn't quite ready for that one. So he jumped in and did kind of a filler for us that month. And so I promised him another slot a few months later so that he could do the presentation that he's going to do today. So today we have Dennis Burnham, and he's going to be talking about Cha-Ching, which is a FileMaker add-on for payment processing. And just going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Dennis.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Let me just share my screen. And I hope you can see my Keynote file.
Yep, you can see
Yeah,
it.
maybe it would be better if I chose to share only that.
Yeah, that screen is pretty wide, so I don't know
Yeah,
how well
so
that's
this is
gonna.
a little better for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you again for the invitation. I'm looking forward to meeting a few of you who are going to be in California in a few months. Today, I've done this presentation a couple of times, so I'm past the point of having any stage fright, and we'll get right into it. I learned long ago that it's important when you do a presentation to start with something funny, maybe a joke or a humorous anecdote. When I was moving from Dallas, Texas to Colorado about 5 years ago, I found this thing on my bookshelf that was called Maps of the World. And I thought, don't throw it away. It's too good. It had in it 8 vinyl pockets. Each one had a different map of a different continent, and there was a map of the whole world. I thought, I'll send this to my daughter and let her give it to her children and let them learn a little bit about geography. So she called me one day and she said that she had the map spread out, the map of Africa spread out on the living room floor. And she was trying to explain to both of my grandchildren how the explorers used to navigate and from continent to continent by using the stars and a sextant in order to figure out where they were. And my grandson, who's in that picture, his comment was, well, why didn't they just use their phone? So that's the world we're living in today, where kids have no clue.
Exactly.
So I presented this concept of payment processing back in 2017 at the Dallas meeting. And that was in January of 2017, which was at a time when we already had insert from URL in FileMaker. We got that back in version 12. But we didn't have JSON functions until version 16. So back in January, I wasn't able to show the use of JSON in my proposal for doing payment processing. And we also didn't have add-ons until much later. In November of last year, almost a year ago, there was a presentation in the Dallas group at Harmonic Data where somebody was presenting how to integrate with Square. And when it came to the Q&A at the end of the meeting, I asked one question, which is, how much does Square pay you to give them customers? And his answer was, well, I don't get any money from them. I just try to integrate it with FileMaker. So what I'm going to show you today is a method of doing payment processing integration where you do get paid for the work you do. On June of this year, I went back to Texas to present this again to them for the first time. So what you're seeing today is only a little bit improved from what I did in June. It just wasn't ready for you guys in July. There are various other systems that are used for payment processing. Most of the major banks, like the ones I've listed here on the left, have their virtual terminal that anybody can log into in order to process somebody's credit card payment. And software platforms like QuickBooks and PayPal and Shopify have a similar way of doing it. And then there are various gateways. The ones that I've highlighted for you in yellow are the ones that I'm using. Network Merchants is a company in Chicago that I've used for many years. CardPoint is the company that is the merchant processor, which is different from a gateway. And I'll explain a little bit more about that later on. Square and Stripe are two that you may have encountered out in the community if you're doing any retail stuff. I know that whenever I go to the yogurt shop next to the movie theater in my neighborhood and I put my credit card into their system, I'm using either Stripe or Square. But neither of them, according to the research that I've done, I even checked with ChatGPT, they don't, at best, they're ambiguous about whether or not they have any kind of a partner program where a developer like us could sign up with them. Square is typically for brick and mortar retail business, and it includes some kind of a POS system that integrates with the cash register. Stripe is more for online businesses, people who are doing work with web pages. If you were to watch Todd Geist's presentation about FileMaker add-ons in the community, you'll see that he does a little demo of how to use Stripe in order to process somebody's credit card. So the who's who about this world of payment processing, for me at least, begins with the use of Fiserv. They're a huge multinational company that is servicing banks and credit unions, a lot of businesses, and they are the behind the scenes processor of getting whatever the approved transaction is and dropping it into my bank account the following morning. Card Connect is a merchant processor. They're one of the Fiserv partners. I've been working with them since, I think, as far back as 2011. They're located in Florida. I became acquainted with them because I knew the former owner, and before he sold the business, he was showing me how I could use their system in order to process credit card payments using FileMaker. Network Merchants is a gateway. They're located in Chicago, and they basically handle the kind of work that Authorize.net would do. They validate whether somebody's credit card is or is not approved, and then they pass the transaction on to Card Connect, and Fiserv runs the money through their bank and ends up in your bank account. So there are benefits of working with both of them. Both of them handle all payment types, including gift and loyalty cards. There's a financial difference according to what kind of a card it is. They all offer optimization for corporate transactions, and that reduces interchange costs by about 1%, maybe a little more for transactions that are eligible for that. Both of them offer security. Integration is important for efficiency, because if your users who are responsible for doing something in FileMaker to get paid, you want them to not have to jump in and out of FileMaker and onto web pages in order to process a payment. And by using the kind of an add-on that I'm going to be showing you today, you can also leverage FileMaker privilege sets in order to decide which of the users are allowed to do something, rather than just open it up to a web page that somebody has to log into with a username and password. PCI compliance is important. Because if somebody is found to be in violation of any PCI compliance rules, the penalty is $50,000 per incident. So it's really important to manage that. And we do that with something called tokenization, where we put the credit card information, and the first time we use it, into something that NMI calls a card vault. CardPoint calls it a profile. But it stores the credit card or bank information securely, so that when you want to run a future transaction, you only have to reference it by the ID number of the customer, and the card information is stored. With NMI and Card Connect, I also get what they call next business day funding. So not counting weekends or holidays, your credit card payments show up in your bank account the next day, and American Express is one additional day. And they offer real-time reporting on each of them, has their own website. But the purpose of my showing it to you today is for you to be able to earn passive income each month by doing the development work that sets up your customers for this kind of integration. Now, the difference between CardPoint and NMI in practical terms is that with NMI, there's something called HTT post. You're using insert from URL, but you don't need a curl payload to be attached to it. It's just a string of a URL that you create in FileMaker. With CardPoint, their whole system is a little bit more modern, works with JSON. Personally, I prefer the simplicity of using NMI, but I'm still having to get the merchant accounts created using the CardPoint API. And then it becomes the user's decision. By user, I mean you, the developer, as to whether you want to work with JSON or work without it. So why do we want to do this with an add-on? First of all, integration requires and it benefits from the skills that you already have in FileMaker. Secondly, bank drafts are now very common. Their processing charges, the fees are less for bank drafts than they are for credit cards. It just takes a few more days for the money to show up in the bank account. But a very important reason is that processing payments doesn't end when you charge a credit card, because unless you apply the payment to an open invoice in the database, customer, at least as far as the database is concerned, still owes the money. So by using an add-on that has all of that round trip activity built into it, you don't have to worry about somebody who's a user of the FileMaker database running a charge through a virtual terminal and forgetting to put the payment into FileMaker to affect that invoice, either with a full or a partial payment. You also have the ability to have better security and productivity by not making people jump in and out of one system and then back into FileMaker. And that's not only satisfying to the customer, but it's also convenient for them. It means that their work in FileMaker is a little bit more efficient. I sometimes used to tell my customers that when they're using, let's say, a Bank of America web page, I called it date rape, because they're taking advantage of people's ignorance by charging them fees that are unnecessary. Whereas when you're doing it with FileMaker and fees that are more reasonable, I call that true love. And then the fact that it's set up by you and you get established as a partner developer, then every month you receive passive income as a portion of the overall volume that's being passed through. And that's not only for the accounts that you're using when you set it up for them, but even month after month, even if the account is inactive, as long as they're getting paid by their customers, you're earning money month after month. So when add-ons became available to us, I thought it would be helpful to be able to distribute this add-on, and eventually it will show up in the marketplace after the full access conference. I'm sure I'm going to be making some enhancements, and after that it'll go into the marketplace. One method of deploying it is with an add-on where you drag and drop it into any FileMaker database. And then you can connect it in the relationship graph to whatever tables already exist in your customer's file for invoices and customers, and be able to access those records for the transactions that you're doing. When you're using the add-on, you're processing transactions for just one merchant. So the second method sets it up as what I'm calling a virtual terminal, where you run this FileMaker database on any FileMaker server, and then you can point to it from as many different customer merchant accounts as you need to. And the third method is, because we're all developers and we like to do things our own way, like Jonathan said a little while ago, you can use the schema that's in here to just build your own custom integration. Now, for today's meeting, I've done a little bit of work to hide things that are my confidential information. I'm going to be using my own account in order to run some transactions and put some credit card information into a vault. But I'm hiding the actual credit card numbers or social security numbers, because obviously this is a recorded meeting and I don't need that kind of risk. So for today, you'll see some things that are blurred or masked out. The way I do it for ordinary use is that I'm putting two fields right on top of one another. So in the foreground, there's a field that shows up with, what do we call that? The bullet characters, concealed edit box, that's what it is. And the background, it's masked after the card is tokenized. So what you see when you're working before you tokenize the account are the typical bullets. And after you tokenize the credit card, then it hides it in a way that lets any typical customer service or bookkeeping person communicate with the customer by saying, what we've got on file is your card is a Visa card that begins with 4 and ends with 1216. So they can speak intelligently to customers without actually seeing the card information that's hidden. So here's an example of how FileMaker's edit box is used. What you're looking at is the way that something looks for a credit card in the top picture and the bank account in the bottom picture, where the numbers that are exposed are not risky or confidential, but the ones that are hidden are. We do the same thing when they fill out the application for merchant for their driver's license or their social security number by using the concealed edit box. It's locked in browse mode, but when you put your cursor into that, you can see what's actually under it. And after the card or bank account is tokenized, then you see it with the asterisk. So again, you can communicate with somebody about it. It's a little bit different in underneath the hood for whether you're using the direct post method or whether you're using the JSON API method, but the end result is the same in the way that it appears to you in the Cha-Ching database. So here's a little bit of a look at the mathematics that might apply if you were to, let's say, have a merchant who runs $3 million a year, then the merchant fees that occur monthly are going to amount to $250,000. And at that rate, what you would earn working with that customer is a little bit more than $4,000 on an annual basis, or $350 a month. And again, I want to stress that even if the account is inactive or dormant or idle to you as a developer because they're happy with your work and they just keep using their database, you continue to earn that passive income. The hierarchy that we'll be establishing is that I'm kind of at the top of the ranking, and each of the developers who begins to use this add-on are directly underneath me, and they would have as many customers as they choose to integrate with underneath them. And the split that is being done on that, by the way, is that out of each dollar that's earned, you get 80 cents of it, and my share of it as the top level in the hierarchy is 20%. So here is how the tokenization works. What you're looking at on these images is a credit card on the left and a bank account on the right. And after the tokenization occurs, then it flips over and the number gets masked. And in the upper right corner of this little window, there's an indication with a check mark that tells you that it's been added to that storage vault or profile. So after that transaction is put into the, I shouldn't say transaction, after the customer's account is put into the vault, FileMaker gives you a typical custom dialog that tells you that it's been added, and you see the result shown. You can also log into the NMI gateway and you can verify that it's actually been there. And they also mask the credit cards in a similar way and show you when it was put there. And the customers, what they call a billing ID is the account number that we're passing to them. And if you were to log in differently and do a search, you can see in the very top where it has the ID number of the customer, and there's a little check mark on the right where you can indicate partial ID matches. What I've used in my own account in order to manage that is I have the credit card with a -A and the bank account with a -B. So if I check the little box that says partial ID matches, I can see in the list at the bottom that this particular customer, which is me, has both a credit card and a bank account stored for future use. Now, if you had to delete the account, it's sort of similar. You would choose from this little option drop-down list that you want to delete the account, and then you would click the button for either credit card or bank, depending on which one that you're trying to delete. And then it will come back and tell you that the card was deleted from the vault. And when it does that, it clears out all the values that were in the database. So if that customer, for example, became inactive, or they told you that their credit card was lost and they wanted you to delete it, you would be able to go in there and delete it. And then when they come back to you with whatever the new one is, you can put it in again. Submitting transactions is similar. What you're looking at on the left is the user interface for the direct post for a credit card charge, and on the right for a charge to a bank account. And I'm going to take you in a moment through a series of steps that get us to the point where what you see in those columns on the right-hand side of each are the keys, the fields, and the values for the key value pairs that are used to generate the URL that you see in the lower left corner. As I said before, with NMI, I'm using the direct post method, so that all I have to do is take that URL that you see in the lower left corner of each of these screens and pass that using insert from URL, and the result is either a successful charge or a decline. Because I'm using a stored credit card in both of these cases, or stored bank account, you can see that in the values column, there are no credit card numbers. And what I've hidden with the blurring that I did with this in Photoshop is I've hidden my password and credentials for logging in. So the process begins where you would select the customer. So as I've got a merchant that is my company name, and underneath it, you can see there are two customers. One is me and one is another person who's fictitious that I made up for this demo. You go through 4 steps in order to create that URL. The first step is that you decide whether you're going to use a minimal set of processing variables or all. I can't think of a good reason why I would use all, but when the app is distributed to you, it comes with a list of every possible processing variable. So if there's one that a particular customer of yours wants to use, you have the ability to select it and make it a stored variable in the variable sets, and you'll see that in just a moment. Second step is to decide on the transaction type. So in this case, it's a sale. And the sale has a category that you see in the field at the bottom. The third step is where you enter the details of the transaction. So the merchant has already been chosen. The customer's already been chosen. I just have to choose the radio button for either credit card or check. And the 5 fields at the bottom are optional except for amount, because obviously you have to have an amount to run a charge, and you would get an error message if you fail to do that. But you can make up whatever reference might be relevant for that particular invoice. You would know the invoice number because you're connected to the customer's database and you know what invoice you're trying to get paid. And then the fourth step shows you all of those variables having been inserted so that you can review them. And it gives you a list of the chosen variable set. So in this case, you're looking at the variable set for a sale. And if you were to right click on, or maybe it's not a right click, it's just a regular click on any of the portal rows, it would tell you what the definition is for that particular variable. So if you didn't know what payment applied to, you could click on it and you would see a little description. In this case, it tells you that the type of a payment is either credit card or check or cash. And it's required for ACH transactions, but for credit cards, it's assumed to be credit card. And then you get these variable sets. So when you start with Cha-Ching, it comes with these 7 different stored variable sets, but you can make your own additional ones if you have a good reason to regularly use a different set of variables. Then all of those things appear, as I showed you a little bit before, and a FileMaker custom dialog tells you that the sale is now ready to be submitted. And there is an option for voiding, which will always tell you that if you're voiding something before the closing time of the batch for each calendar day, it will be voided. But if it's after the closing time of the batch, then you would be instructed to use a refund instead. The difference is that if you void it, the owner of that credit card or bank account will never see it on their statement. If you refund it, then obviously they will see the refund adjacent to the charge. It might be that you're doing a partial refund if for some reason there, somebody complains and thinks that they shouldn't have been charged as much. A refund can be run at any time. So when it's submitted, then this is the URL. And again, I've masked out the confidential part of it, but because you can put your cursor into that field, if you ever needed to, you could copy and paste it. You could test it in a web browser if you needed to, but most of the time what you'll do is you'll click the button that tells you to submit it. And when you submit it, you get back a custom dialog that tells you the transaction was approved. There's also a transaction log that's in chronological order. So you can see that yesterday and the day before yesterday, maybe it was the day before yesterday, I was doing some testing to be prepared for you today. And if you click the view button that's on the right side of that portal, it will put those transaction details. So it stores them in case you had to, for any reason, go back and look at it. In the upper portion of the screen on the left side, you can see the actual text that you receive back from the gateway. And what I've done in Cha-Ching is I've translated that into JSON. So if you're inclined to use JSON in order to post the item into the customer's invoice as a payment record, you have it right there that you can do that. And here you just see it enlarged. It's got the necessary details. In this case, I was capturing the voiding of a transaction, but the transaction ID still appears so that I can refer to that if I needed to. If I log into the NMI webpage to look at the account and see my transactions, you can see that at the time of day that I did that on the 21st, I had a check sale that was pending approval because the checks take an extra few days before they are approved, and the approval of the credit card was immediate. So I call this the accounts receivable home run. By the way, if anybody has questions, you can just speak right up and interrupt me. We begin when in FileMaker, you're creating the sale. So you're creating some kind of a record that's maybe an order or a purchase of some kind. You go to second base when you present the invoice to the customer. And then you advance to third base when you want to get paid. And then finally, obviously, when you get paid, you want to apply that payment to your application. I should say apply the payment to the record in the database. What I've also provided for in Cha-Ching is a layout that will run an accounts receivable aging. So you can at any time see the multi-page report, if necessary, to show you how current or old any one of the invoices are. I'm always recommending that you create a scheduled server script to automatically adjust the values in the due date field so that you don't have to have that as an unstored calculation. If the day count is an unstored calculation, it slows down the process of running this report or doing inquiries. But if you run a server script that automatically adjusts those values in the field every day at midnight, then you know that anytime you run this report, the number of days due will be correct, and it will deposit that number into the proper column for either 30, 60, 90, or over 120 days. So in the Cha-Ching add-on, what you have is a layout. Now, I know you can't copy and paste layouts yet from one place to another. Well, you can't import them, but you can copy and paste elements, and I'm sure we've all done that. The field definitions that are used for this aging are readily available, and you can import those fields as needed and add them to your own invoices table. And there's also a script that runs this report, which is also something that you can import or copy. So to begin, what we're going to be doing is having you create your own merchant account. And the reason I encourage you to do that is because, for one thing, you practice what you preach. You're able to use it in order for yourself to be able to process payments if you haven't already got a way of doing that. And it probably will reduce your processing costs and enhance your own security and productivity the way that you're recommending it to your customers. And then if necessary, if you're the kind of company that has multiple developers on your team, you can use the reporting features to manage whatever internal distribution you want to do for the income that you receive every month. Ultimately, I think that this will reduce your company's overhead, and it's like on-the-job training for you to become experienced at how to instruct your customers of how things will work. So in order to get started, you will find that the Cha-Ching database is running on my server. And if you were to log into it with the account name FMDEV and the password developer, you'll be able to create a merchant record for yourself. I'm using that more or less as a prospect list for the people who I have been showing this to. And then when the add-on file is ready for distribution, I'll know that you are somebody who's interested in having it. There is no cost for it. If I didn't say that already, the Cha-Ching add-on is free. The only way that I would earn anything from this database is if people who are developers become users of it in order to create merchant accounts for the customers who are using the FileMaker databases that you create and manage. There's an application form that I'll show you in a moment. You don't have to fill it in, but you can definitely poke around on it as much as you want in order to see what it's like. And if you are a principal in a company that has a team, there's a little checkbox so that I'll be sure to get the name and an email from those people. There is a recording of the June 6th recording at this YouTube location. So if anybody needs me to go back to this, if you weren't able to copy it down, or you can see it in the recording, they recorded almost everything on the 6th of June. There were a few things that were added to the recording afterward, things that I didn't have the time to present in person. So I'll show you where those are as well. So when you log in to Cha-Ching, you're going to see a screen that looks like the one you see here on the right. And there are really only three places to go on that. There's an introduction, there's an application, and there's the setup. There's also a little about button that's invisible here, but I'll show you that. If you choose the setup, it will take you to a layout where you'll see Hello Developer in the button bar at the top of the layout. And underneath that, you'll see that there's a partner sales code. You'll be given what my code is, and that's what you will put in there. You can choose in the setup whether you want the deployment method to be the add-on, the virtual terminal, or custom. And if you were to choose virtual terminal, then you'll be able to specify the data source that's in your relationship graph. And what I've been using for the demo is Richard Carlton's starting point database. It's a very easy one to use because it has a lot of test records in it for accounts and invoices and various other data. On the right-hand side, you can see some download buttons for the list of variables, which I'm giving you either as an Excel file or a FileMaker database, and you can grab either one of those as you wish. And then you would see this entry form. So here I'm giving you an example of how Henry Ford filled out the developer data entry for the Ford Motor Company with his phone number and email address. And if he had any comments, he wanted to make them, and he's indicating that he's not a company principal. This is the application layout that I'm going to take you through when I show you a live demo in a few minutes. And you'll be able to poke around on that and examine all the different things that you see there. And finally, let's see, it goes to the PDF example of the merchant application that you're able to download for yourself if you want to see what it looks like when it's printed out. Here, I'm showing you the merchant table and the way the relationship graph looks. Now, This may go through a little bit of cleanup after the full access conference. There's some things that may be removed, and maybe I doubt there'll be anything new that's added. When you're using it as an add-on, there's only one merchant record. When you're using it as a virtual terminal, you can have multiple merchant records because you'll be processing from various customers, and everything optional for when you're doing the custom deployment. The PDF document that you see on the right is like a user manual that you'll be able to download, and it has all the details in it on, I think, about 27 pages, illustrated as much as I possibly could. And what I'm doing, you can do also with Cha-Ching, is that you can use the merchant table as a list of prospects. So you're looking at an example of 5 prospects, 3 of whom have already been assigned merchant ID numbers. The others are still, pending. Here I'm showing you a little bit more detail about how the diagram in the relationship graph has evolved, and pointing to certain regions that I've tried to be as explicit as possible to help you understand what these different table occurrences are for. And what I call step to success is how you would go about the process of introducing this to your customers. First thing is you would have to learn, how are they handling sales and collections at the moment? Then you would use the Cha-Ching add-on, or running it as a virtual terminal, whichever way you want to do it, in order to create the merchant accounts that are needed for each of the clients. That results in you obtaining a merchant ID number, and then that allows you to submit their banking information, their gateway order, all the different things that come out of that application process. And then you begin to deploy Cha-Ching. And there's work to be done in FileMaker. But what I've attempted to do is to make it as simple as possible. You will probably have to go into Script Workspace and either create your own scripts, or you can use some of the ones that are in Cha-Ching if you want to use them as a starting point for application of payments to invoices. You need to always anticipate a 3 to 5 day delay for the funding of bank account transactions. And you can create a scheduled server script that will check every day just to make sure that you're able to determine which bank transactions have become funded overnight, so that you can run the payment application for those. And when I say you can do it, I'm really talking about the FileMaker users who would need to do that. The better your scripts are, the less time it takes. That's always a good cardinal rule with the work we do in FileMaker. Here again is an image of the tutorial document that I have created, and you'll be able to download that. It has all the details that you need. And there are some things I just want to comment on before I show you a live demo about FileMaker add-ons. We got them in version 19, and most of the time you will find those in the marketplace. It isn't necessary, but obviously if I'm looking for more people to use it, it's a good place to give it exposure. If you search around in the community about FileMaker add-ons, you'll find a variety of articles and a few videos. The video that Todd Geist narrates was made by Jeremy Brown when he worked for Geist. And it's a pretty good video, but he admits in that video that there are some unknown things. And I've been in touch with Claris to try to find out if, since the release in version 19, they've figured out what any of those issues are, but I haven't found updates anywhere. So I've done the best I could to explore and find out what the limitations are and try to avoid using them. I'm thinking right now of an example. There was something about grouped buttons, for instance. I think Todd mentioned this in his video, where for some reason grouped buttons or button bars were not working, but when you made them into separate buttons, they were okay. So I've made sure not to have that mistake inhibit the use of it. So at that point, I'm ready to launch the application and show it to you, unless anybody has any questions at this point. If not, then I'll just change my screen share and point to the...
Dennis?
Yeah. Sure.
I do have a question. I apologize.
That's okay.
I
No
couldn't get
apology
to
necessary.
couldn't get to my mic button fast enough. You talked about running the script at night to capture the ACHs.
Yes.
Um, do you, because I know that ACHs can bounce.
Yes.
Is that why you delay it 3 days, or
No.
do you recommend a a periodic check to see if something has bounced? Because they don't notify you.
Yeah,
You have
that's a
to.
good point, Jonathan. And I'll tell you, the reason that I'm recommending it is so that you can determine the status of any submitted one. The reason why it takes a
Okay.
few days is because it takes a few days. Now, I'll give you an interesting little bit of background on that. I have a client here in Denver who called me one day and he said, could you figure out a way? It's always the way they start their questions, right? In FileMaker, is it possible? And of course, it's always possible. Uh, he wanted to know, could I do something that would give him a cash flow projection? It's a psychology practice that has about 15 or 18 clinicians who basically work with child psychology. And a lot of the cases, there's divorced parents. So the fee that they're paying for the psychology is split between the two parents. So it's a little bit unusual that one of the parents might be paying with a credit card, the other one might be paying with a bank account. So
Uh,
it got a little bit complex. But the main point was that I could say to him, if everybody was paying with a credit card, I could very easily give you a cash flow projection because I know that the Visa credit cards and the MasterCards and Discovers, you're going to have that money tomorrow if it was an approved transaction. And you know that it's approved at the time that you post it. But with the checks, I can't guarantee it. So then I thought about the fact that back in 1977, when I moved my company from New York, where I was a customer of Chase, to New Jersey, where I was in a small town and I was a customer of a smaller bank. All of a sudden, I became a VIP because the bank realized that they were getting a big business account with a payroll every week, and I had 110 employees and so forth. So the bank manager invited me to the branch, and he took me downstairs into the basement where there were about 12 employees who were sorting checks. And of course, the reason that they had to sort the checks and was because at the end of every month, you remember in those days, I know you're old enough, you would get with your bank statement all of the cleared checks for the month. And what they had to do was sort those things day after day after day. So at the end of the month, they could mail them out with the statements. Well, we don't do that anymore. We get images of checks today. But my thought was every bank has an ABA routing number. So seemed to me that maybe if I do a report every day from FileMaker server and I sort by the routing number, they all would be predictably the same number of days. And then I could give a cash flow projection because I would know that, let's say, Wells Fargo always takes 4 days and Chase always takes 3 days and Bank of America always takes 5 days, or whatever it would be. It turned out I was wrong. There is no consistency. And I don't know why there's no consistency, but that's a long answer to your short question, which is that the reason running the report on a daily basis is just to know the status of something. And you will see the status on the report as declined if for some reason the bank account was empty at the time that they tried to clear the check. So you
okay.
can
So
only go
are you
ahead.
saying that you don't post them until you get an
Right,
approved?
right,
So that's why you check every night. See, can
right,
I post it yet? Can I post it yet? Can I post
right.
it yet? Is that what you're doing?
Exactly.
Okay. So that will catch the bounces.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I
And of
see.
course, if there is no result yet and it's still pending, there would be no reason to bother the customer about it. But if it was declined, then of course somebody would pick up the phone and say to the customer, you know, that check you gave me a few days ago didn't clear.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
that's a good solution for that. I have done in the past where it accepts the money and posts it, and then it goes back and checks, and then notifies the user if it bounced.
right.
So,
Right. So the situation hasn't changed in terms of banks clearing things. There's nothing that's going to clear it instantly. It's going to take X number of days, and it varies from one institution to another.
Yeah.
So here we are in the opening screen. I told you there was a new About button. All that is just a little pop-up that shows a little bit of my history and how we built this. If I go to the introduction, here I'm giving you an explanation step by step of what is a merchant, something about the add-on, what's a virtual terminal, and how you can build it into any of your apps. It's just a little step-by-step thing with some illustrations that I've put in popovers to help people understand what I mean by a virtual terminal, where you've got the database and you've got a server. It could be on a server anywhere, and it'll run transactions from Macintosh or tablets or Windows or phones. It doesn't matter where the charge is generated. And then when you want to build into any of your apps, then you've got the FileMaker schema that you get to work with.
Excuse me, Dennis.
Yeah.
You shared just the window, so none of your popovers are showing.
Oh, the popovers are not showing. So you want me to change my share?
Well, I'm just saying,
I get you.
if there was something specific you wanted us to see, we can't see the new
Okay.
windows.
Now you can. So
Okay.
here I was showing you a pop-up.
Okay.
I guess Zoom doesn't admit that FileMaker pop-ups are really in the same application.
Well, you're not sharing the application, you're sharing the window with Zoom.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So
but it would be nice if Zoom would regard add-ons, not add-ons, excuse me,
yeah.
new windows
I
or
run
card
into that
windows
all the time.
but
Yeah.
it doesn't yet. So anyway, that's what's going on the introduction. I could go back to the home and I could click on application. And this is the application that will be completed for any merchant. If they're in your prospect list and they haven't been done yet, you can choose them and gather the information you've already entered, or you can create a brand new one. So what you're providing here is the business information and the address of the business. For the owner, you're providing who's the owner, how much of it do they own. So for example, if I chose limited liability company, then in terms of ownership, let's say if I chose 85%, it would show me that I have to now tell who the additional owner is. If the ownership is 100%, then there's no additional owner required. The owner's address gets inserted here. I told you before that the social security number is masked. So if I type in a 9-digit number, you don't see it, you see the bullets. But for developers, I've provided this little button that will expose it if necessary. So your customers wouldn't ever be seeing that, but you certainly would. And if anybody's looking over your shoulder, they wouldn't be able to see anything because it's masked from view. When you go to the bank account, you've got the standard information. So these little warning symbols just indicate that something is incomplete. So for instance, if I choose that it's going to be a savings account, the warning symbol goes away. If I put in a routing number that isn't enough digits, it's going to remain there as, well, it should remain there, but it's tolerating it as being not empty. And then if for some reason somebody has multiple merchant accounts within the same company, for example, I have one customer in Texas that has a different merchant account for their retail store than for their upstairs travel division. So if they were to click on multiple merchant accounts, they're going to get an explanation of why they need to create a separate application. If they have separate bank accounts for the deposits and withdrawals, then they'll complete the same information for both of them. And finally, the processing information. Now, I'll admit that one of the things I'm hoping to learn by the time we're done with full access is I want to be able to get rid of this list of codes that people have to choose from and begin to use AI so that somebody could type in, let's say, the word, I don't know, phishing, and it would show up with the things that artificial intelligence thinks are in that list. But for the time being, instead of using a normal drop-down list or pop-up menu, I made it into a portal. So if somebody chooses petroleum and petroleum products, then it fills that in and they can type a description of their business, their volume, how much time elapses between the doing of the work and the sending of an invoice, when are services provided. So let's say I chose 31 to 60 days. Here, let's say I chose 10% and 30% and another 20%. And if I choose an incorrect number, it's going to say it doesn't equal 100%. So 50 and 10 is 60. If I make this 40, the warning goes away. Is it seasonal or not? Do they bill prior to shipment? Do they require a deposit? And here they can insert whoever will be the gateway. I'm pre-filling it with NMI. How many of your transactions are keyed? So again, let's say it's 30% keyed and 5% swipe and 45% e-commerce. And now for e-commerce, it wants to know what the website is. So just type in google.com. So we have something, it doesn't even matter if it's right or not. But if it doesn't equal 100%, it's going to tell me. So if I choose 20% for the remainder, that goes away. And which cards will they accept? And then finally, they'll get to this finish and submit page. If they click this submit merchant button, it will create the merchant account. Here, they also have the ability to upload recent statements if they're working with a current merchant processor and they want to make sure that they're getting a better rate than they're getting from their current one. Here in the lower right corner, I'm giving a PDF example that you can click this button to download. And then finally, if we go to the payments, where they would actually process something, you're going to see this message that asks you, do you want to create a new payment, or do you want to deal with one of the ones that's already in existence, or do you want to do neither of those things? So if I click review and I go to sort by date, and so here's this September 22nd transaction. It will now it will put that into this list. There's a reason why it didn't put it in. I just chose my merchant. And here I can choose whether I want to use this customer or this customer. And on the right-hand side, you see all of their data. So if I choose J. Hayton Company and I click on the credit card, you can see how it will display what's in it. But if I were to choose this customer, where if I choose the API method, you can see it's already in the vault, so it's already masked. If I go back to the direct post method, I can click in it and I can still see the credit card number. Then when you choose whether you want to add, delete, or update it, it will do that task. And I think that's about all that I have to show online, unless you have more questions. Here's the merchant list that I was showing you before. If I choose any one of these customers, it will allow me to fill in their basic information. I can later on, after they become a merchant, indicate their closing time of their batch, their username and password for login. Did you have something, Jonathan?
Yeah. My question is always with credit card stuff is how do you do PCI compliance with FileMaker? It's just you're not allowed to keep information. You're not allowed to store any credit card information in a changeable environment. It has to be locked down, certified, all kinds of stuff. So help me out with there. How do you say that you're PCI compliant and get away or just get away with it?
Okay, so the way that it's been explained to me and has always been the fact for me is that nobody has come into my company to force me to open up FileMaker and then poke at it as if they were auditors to try to discover something. I've made sure that only developers who have the full access password are able to see things that are otherwise hidden from view with the things that I've been showing you, the bulleted characters that don't allow you to click through it and see the real thing once it has been tokenized. So I should really make this the first part of my answer to you. The best way to make sure that you're PCI compliant is to store that information in your merchant gateway account so that it's not in FileMaker in a visible way whatsoever. You might see the first digit 5 to tell you it's a MasterCard. You might see the last 4 digits so that you can at least communicate with the customer if they were to call you on the phone and say, well, I lost that card, I need to replace it. You could do what's necessary to delete it and put a new one in. It's only visible the moment that you're first typing it to put it in. And once you've done that and you've tokenized the card, then you can relax about it.
But what if you don't tokenize it right away?
Well, if you don't tokenize it right away, then the privilege sets of the users will govern what they can see. So if you decide that if you go into managed security and you say that a certain privilege set other than a full access user is not allowed to access the data in that field, they won't see it. And they certainly can't edit it. Because you're in control of the privilege sets.
One other requirement is that if it is in the FileMaker database or it's in a database, it has to be encrypted at rest.
Good point. Good point.
So
and
you can, it's all about encryption. And as long as your FileMaker, the way I read it, and it may have changed and somebody may have different viewpoints on it, but it says it has to be encrypted and it has to be secure and it has to be stored when it's not in operation or not being used. It has to be stored in a encrypted at rest file so that no one else can open that. And
right.
obviously FileMaker Server has that capability. And like you said, if you make it so only a full access or one user gets to see those numbers after they're put in, then you have an SSL that's legit, it's going to be pretty hard for anybody to get in and prove that you're not PCI if you are missing something. That's pretty much covers what it is. It's not as strict as some people think, but
you're absolutely right, Marty. And we both know that, or we all know that FileMaker Claris will encourage us to encrypt files before we put them on the server. We're not forced to do so. But if we make sure that our files are encrypted at rest, you're right, that does cover most of the PCI compliance right there.
And then you just got to hide it and make sure that basically 99.9% of the people that access the file can't see that number.
Right.
I mean, and you could make it so that no one can ever see that number.
You can. That's right. You can.
If you really wanted to protect yourself, you could say, hey, I can't get your number out anyways.
That's exactly right. If
I
you
can delete it and put a new
to,
one in, but I can't see it.
That's correct. That's correct.
Would you possibly consider encrypting it?
Yes, you could do that too. You certainly could. That's probably a good example of something that will come out of my attending the full access conference. That's kind of a suggestion that I would definitely include in this add-on, that it would encrypt the card number so that it isn't even visible at all.
If you're not going to store them in your file at all, and you're going to put them up in your merchant account, you don't really need to, right? You've taken out the number and just
that's right.
Stored the first digit and the last 4 digits. So there is no number there, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
You don't have to encrypt that. But if you wanted to keep it and reuse it instead of having your merchant store it, which sometimes isn't an easy process, but it looks like you've covered all the bases here. I did one, probably it was almost 20 years ago. It was over about 16, 17 years ago. And I used First Data and I just stored credit cards right in FileMaker.
Yep. There's a session next month at Full Access that I was added to the presenter list for it. It's called Red Flags During Discovery. And I was thinking about the kind of questions that I generally ask a new customer, and something that would be a red flag, at least in respect to payment processing, is how many of your employees have full access to this database? Too often you find that there are too many people who have full access. And why do they have it? Maybe they don't know any better. We certainly got some help a few years ago when we got that ability in managed security to allow a certain kind of user to be able to create accounts and assign a privilege set, but not create the privilege set. So having multiple people with full access is a danger that doesn't directly talk to the PCA compliance, but I think it definitely matters.
That would be a HIPAA violation as well.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, my understanding was that if you enter the data into FileMaker in any way, shape, or form, in unencrypted form, that somebody could create like a rogue employee, like one of your developers that you had to fire, and on his way out, he put a back door in on that data. You are storing the data, and I'm talking a hypothetical, hyperbolic, but these things happen, or a vendor gets into your network and sees some, can access something. Um, the the PCI compliance, because I had a bank, and then the thing that set this off for me was I had a client that we had a system, and I was talking about attaching the credit card uh, uh, readers to a FileMaker app that they had, and the bank said, absolutely no way are you allowed to touch anything to do with credit cards that is not certified by somebody. And FileMaker can't be certified because it's constantly changing. You'd need to certify it every time you change something. So um, and that's a issue with FDA, and there's all kinds of things that require certification. Since FileMaker is so easy to change, that those kinds of security through obscurity things are not allowed. So
I
It
had a
also,
customer.
can I
I
say
had a
that?
customer here in Denver who said to me, I don't need to integrate anything into my database. I just let my employees log into the virtual terminal at the bank and run the credit card charge. Well, I learned long ago from my CPA that one thing you want to definitely avoid is letting employees make secret deals with customers, because that same person could go into the virtual terminal and give that customer a credit, and it would look
yeah,
like they've paid their bill.
yeah,
Or not charge at all, just go into FileMaker and
There,
post a record that looks like a payment.
there's
So
there's another issue that the thing is that if you're open to the web and you have all sorts of different companies accessing it, you got a different issue. But I did one for a medical that I had to do a HIPAA on, and they were all internal. That database never saw the light of day outside their own office. So 90% of what they were talking about in HIPAA didn't apply because it was within their own office and everybody was, certified anyways. So that's another thing to look at. Are you using this with multiple companies across multiple, landscape where they're coming in and it's open to the web? You have to be a little bit more careful because of ports being open and access to it. If it's internal, you got a lot less to worry about. You still have to lock it down the best you can.
I agree. I can tell you that in all my years of running charges, every single one of my clients for whom I've integrated has been a completely custom situation. I didn't have a tool like this that would simplify the process for me and keep me out of trouble. But once I created my scripts that would run the credit card charges, only the people who were authorized to run that script and see the data could do
FileMaker security is, I think, is pretty good. I
Oh,
know
yeah.
some people, and I'm not the greatest. I'm certainly not a hacker, right? I can't hack into things, but I don't know anybody that has hacked a FileMaker system yet. Anyways, certainly none of mine.
Well, if they can get access to the server, chances are they can do something if they're smart.
Well, that's why you have to have it encrypted at
Rest.
rest.
Right.
Yeah, but if the file is running,
No, as soon as they shut it down, it's encrypted.
right. But if the file is running and somebody can get access to your network, they can get into your file.
I guess supposedly people keep telling me that, but I've never seen anybody actually do it.
Is what you're saying, Jonathan, somebody getting into your file with a username and password?
Well, or some kind of cracking trick. There are ones out there that will remove the password and stuff like that. Um, there's um, it's it's not locked. It's not because like I said, because FileMaker is so easy to change stuff that that stuff that requires super high security um, has more control than FileMaker does. So you just need to be careful, I suppose, in real life. The systems that people have on their counter sitting next to their cash register, those systems only communicate directly from the card back to the uh, processor. They don't run anything through an external database it is uh, until it's been uh, processed. So that's a different approach that we don't have available to us.
Well, for example, if you're in a restaurant and you hand your MasterCard to the waitress
Oh,
and
that's yeah.
you don't see that card again until she comes back to you for you to sign the receipt, you don't know where it's been and what's
Well,
been
that's
done
why
with
they're
it.
bringing the terminal to the table now.
Now they do. That's true.
Yeah.
And in the old days, remember, we were told to discard the little carbon copy of the receipts that we would sign because they had the information. So security is a gradually increasing discipline.
Yeah. I lost the card one time. It's a tangential. I lost a card one time, and I called the restaurant where I thought I left it, and they came back about 10 minutes later and said, "Oh yeah, sorry it took us so long. We had 200 cards to go through to find yours." These restaurants were collecting these cards, I guess. I don't know, but people were just stupid with forgetting their cards.
Yeah, and now we have cards that are with the chips on them, and a lot of the information is on Apple's Goldman Sachs cards. Those titanium ones. There's nothing visible on the card whatsoever.
I was
Oh
working
yeah.
on I have a insert from URL and a system for doing payments via Stripe. And I was working with AI a little bit on it, and the technique that I use, the credit card number, it's for being able to take a credit card over the phone because that's kind of the one thing that you still need to be able to tell somebody the number and they type it in. And where the credit card number is entered is into global fields, so it never touches the server. The process is run using global fields, global variables, and then clears those out after the response is retrieved. So, and I was working with AI and describing the system that I was working on, and it actually told me that that makes it PCI compliant because it's not touching the server. It's not being stored in the database. It's just being temporarily housed in a global field, and then the transaction is encrypted, and so therefore, it would be considered PCI compliant.
Till you have an employee that says, "Hey, let's just stick this line of code in here that just before it empties the global, it saves it somewhere."
But the kind of stuff you're talking about is, they provide terminals for people to enter. You could have an employee that takes it that way. You could have an employee that
Sure.
steals credit cards any number of ways that, now you've opened it up to, okay, you just cannot take credit cards under any circumstances, no matter what, because there's always a human, potential for somebody to do something like that. But
True.
electronically speaking, if the system is built to use global fields, then the system is built correctly. Yeah, we have and I understand what you're saying. We have a product that you could have multiple people in the office that could go into layout mode or change a field or change a script or things like that. Like FileMaker is very easy to do those things with. And so I get what you're saying with, I think uh, it would be hard to have like a FileMaker product be called PCI compliant unless it was absolutely locked down and could never be changed. Like you
Right.
couldn't distribute it as a, file that you could get a full access account to and then open it up and make changes to it.
Right.
What,
And if you did make changes, you'd have to get it recertified.
Recertified, right? So,
now,
but
what I'm showing you here is that the field that is the one that I showed you with masked is a text field, but it's got a hide property on it. And the one in the middle is the typical edit box, and this one could very easily be changed to the global that you just advised. And then the other one is the one with the concealed edit box. However, the concealed edit box is only displaying bullets that are based upon whatever it finds in this field. So if the field is global and tomorrow somebody else or you log in again and the global value disappeared, there won't be any bullets. So that's the kind of a change that I could certainly make between now and the end of October to incorporate what you say about the global field, because once it's masked after it's been tokenized, it's a text field that doesn't have a relationship to anything else.
Right, right. And I totally agree. The tokenization really solves a lot of problems. It just doesn't get us 100% there.
Right.
Yeah.
yeah, I've done some work lately with Stripe and trying to come up with uh, even just being able to process out of FileMaker is literally just you cannot use their API and just send the data and process. What I've had to do was host uh, their form for grabbing the credit card information on a web server with a secure socket layer. That was the requirement. And then I'm using a web viewer to pull that in and then entering the credit card information. At that point, you're saving the credit card information to Stripe and getting a token back. And then from there on out, FileMaker can use APIs to be able to process those transactions using that token. But
That's what
or
this payment
that
API.
method ID basically uses a method ID but in
Yeah.
order to submit the payment method to Stripe, it has to use a web viewer, and the actual form is a form in the web viewer that's hosted on a web server. So you can't build it directly into FileMaker into the web viewer because that's where I began. I built it that way in test mode, and everything worked beautifully. Where the form itself was built in a FileMaker web viewer, the code was built in the web viewer calculation. As soon as I switched it to live, that form just blinked out of existence like it didn't exist. So I ended up going round and round with AI, and I was so furious because I'm like, how? Because I was using AI to help me build this. I was like, how can you walk me through hours of building something that's not going to work in live mode? Like AI was like, oh yeah, this isn't going to work in live mode because you have to actually have it on a server with a secure socket layer, and FileMaker's SSL doesn't work. And I'm like, why would you walk me through how to build this whole thing only to find out that it can't in live in
Yeah.
production mode? Like, I was furious with AI for taking me down that whole thing, but then I ended up figuring out how to turn it all around and put it into it's actually a pretty neat solution. It uses webhooks to be able to serve up the form and bring it back into the web viewer and all that stuff. So, but yeah, so I even there I got away from even using the global fields because the different processors continue to update and make things stricter. For instance, Stripe, for instance, my Stripe account that I use for my business, I can still process the way that I had built it before using the global fields and APIs. But any new Stripe account that I've worked with clients where I've opened up a new Stripe account. We did one for full access. That method would not work because they increased the security on it. They made some changes to not allow it anymore. So apparently my account is kind of grandfathered in, but all new accounts, that method no longer works for new accounts. So that was quite an experience to kind of go through that. So, but ultimately the end result for, as I said, like I do some stuff with authorized.net as well, and they don't have the same kind of things that Stripe has in place. So I still have to use the global fields. And as I said, at least AI seems to think that that's PCI compliant. And it says specifically because that data never hits the server. So,
When I first started using NMI about 14 years ago, I was easily able to compare them to authorized.net because authorized.net had a basic charge of $10 a month and 10 cents per transaction. I don't know if it changed it today, but NMI was $5 a month and 5 cents per transaction. So right there was a savings. When you tokenize your cards, you pay a little bit extra money, but it's well worth it, of course, because of the security that you get with that.
Well, I would think they would require it. Yeah.
Well, the PCI compliance is what really requires it.
Yeah. That's a very nice app that Dennis, that's because I've done credit cards through several things and plugins and stuff, and this is really cool.
Well, good. I'm glad you liked it. If you download the app, of course, the add-on, it will appear in the add-ons portion of your layout, and then you just drag and drop it onto a layout. But I think that a lot of people who are dealing with multiple customers are going to have just as easy a time putting it as a database on a server and then pointing to it from whatever client database they have. It doesn't matter where the server is located, doesn't matter where the customer's database is, as long as it's online.
So you're saying it would be a separate app that their version of the app would contact to run the processing.
No, that's not exactly what I'm saying is that when you download the thing that I'm calling an add-on, you don't have to drag and drop it into a layout. You can run it as a database. It is all the add-ons are FMP12 files.
Right.
And for that, I would recommend watching Todd Geist's community video about add-ons. It's pretty instructive about what add-ons are and how to make them. Claris just isn't really good at keeping us up to date on the bugs that they may have found and corrected, like the thing I mentioned about the button bar.
Yeah. Well, so how do you deal with multiple customers with one solution again? Do you just give them their own copy of this?
Well, if you have multiple customers, what I would be having you do is create in this copy as many merchants as you want. And for each merchant, you can have users. So for instance, if I choose healthcare graphics consulting, they have 3 users who would be able to run transactions. They wouldn't have access to this file that's running on the server. you would. And you can use this merchant list if you want to use it as a way of, gathering prospects.
Sure.
And then the scripts that are in their database would point to this for processing a charge.
Okay, so this would be the one place that all of their files point to
Right.
when they want to
And
process
if
a
I
charge.
show you the
Okay.
graph, you can see
Okay.
that in the left corner here is where I've explained how I've used Richard Carlton's database as an example of that.
Okay.
I haven't configured any external invoices or external accounts, but I do have a connection already to the what he calls FileMaker starting point, FMSP.
Right.
The other thing I should have mentioned this, you see the prefix on a lot of my table occurrences is CHCH. That's just an abbreviation for Cha-Ching, and I did that so that you wouldn't have a conflict of table and table occurrence names with whatever it might be in the database that you're connecting to.
Good.
Everybody has a table called customers. So I
Cool.
hope that
very
I've given you something to think about. And of course, the main reason that I think this makes sense is that if you create merchant accounts, it is potential income for you on a regular basis, as long as that customer's in business and continuing to use whatever you've built for them.
nice.
So if there are no more questions, then I can ask Ron. You can stop the recording if you want, and people can say whatever horrible things that they would rather not have recorded.